Hello. Welcome to the channel. Today, I'm going to share with you an incredible and transforming, full of emotions and twists, that will touch everyone's heart. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I love to know how far our stories reach. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Are you ready? Let's go on this journey together. My name is Levi Solomon, and my past is like a tapestry interwoven with the traditions and values of Orthodox Judaism. I was born in Williamsburg, New York, into a devout family deeply rooted in faith. My father, Moshe Solomon, was a Torah scholar, known for his phenomenal memory and ability to accurately quote entire passages. My mother, Esther, dedicated every minute of her days to prayer, maintaining a kosher home, and raising children within the highest standards of spiritual purity. From a young age, my destiny seemed laid out. I demonstrated an unusual talent for religious studies. While other children memorized small portions of the Torah, I was already reciting entire books, absorbing the teachings with an insatiable hunger. My father used to call me Ben Torah, son of the Torah, a title that filled his voice with pride. At the age of 12, I was sent to one of New York's most rigorous yeshivas. There my days began before dawn with morning prayers and ended late at night after long hours of study. There was no room for worldly distractions. Every moment was dedicated to understanding the Word of God and applying His laws. My rise in the community was swift. By 18, I was already considered a prodigy. My rabbi mentor, Isaac Cohen, often said to others, "Levi is not just a student, he is a teacher in the making." With his guidance, I began giving small lessons to other students, explaining the most complex details of the halakha and rabbinical interpretations. Over time, I took on larger responsibilities. At 25, I was appointed rabbi of one of the most respected synagogues in Williamsburg. It was a role I performed with zeal. In the eyes of my community, I was a pillar of wisdom and leadership. My sermons attracted crowds, and my counseling sessions were sought by those seeking spiritual guidance. However, something inside me was changing. There were specific passages of the Torah and the prophets that left me unsettled. Isaiah 53, for instance, spoke of the suffering servant, a figure that seemed beyond any traditional interpretation I knew. In my heart, a question arose that I dared not share. Who, in fact, was this servant? One night, after a long day of studies and prayers, I mentioned the passage from Isaiah to Rachel, my wife. "It's a metaphor." She responded without hesitation, "The rabbis have already explained this." "I know," I replied hesitantly. "But what if there is more? What if we are missing something?" Rachel furrowed her brow. "Levi, you're tired. It's best to rest." Her eyes reflected concern, but also a boundary that I should not cross. For her, for my congregation, for my entire family, doubting the traditional interpretations was unthinkable. And so I suppressed those doubts. I continued preaching, teaching, and counseling, convincing myself that my mind was being tested and that my faith must prevail. Still, deep down in my soul, restlessness persisted. I felt like a man looking at a closed door, knowing that there was something precious on the other side, yet lacking the courage to turn the knob. It was a common night in our house in Williamsburg. Rachel was in the kitchen, organizing the dishes from the dinner we had just shared. Our routine conversations flowed between discussions about the upcoming Shabbat preparations and little comments about the class I had taught that morning. It was a moment of peace, the serenity of a predictable and regulated life, wrapped in the traditions that sustained us. While Rachel cleaned the table and I realized the toaster had broken. It had been showing issues in recent days, but that night, it seemed to have stopped working entirely. I was not exactly a handyman with repairs, but I liked to solve small domestic issues on my own. I picked up the toaster and said, almost jokingly, "Let me show that, besides being a rabbi, I can be an amateur mechanic. Levi, be careful." Rachel warned with a brief smile. "Maybe it's better to leave it for tomorrow. It's a simple thing," I retorted. "It'll take 5 minutes." I opened the toaster on the counter, examining the internal components. It seemed an easy task. I picked up a screwdriver and started fiddling with the wires. What I didn't realize was that, during dinner, some water had splashed on the appliance. It was all wet, and I didn't think to completely unplug the toaster. Then it happened. The moment I touched one of the internal wires, an electric wave coursed through my body with indescribable force. It wasn't just pain. It was like my entire body was being torn by an invisible, paralyzing force. I tried to scream, but my voice didn't come out. Everything around me seemed to freeze. The electric shock threw me backward, and my head hit hard on the cold kitchen tile floor. For an instant, I heard Rachel scream my name, but her voice quickly became a distant echo. My field of vision began to darken. The pain disappeared, giving way to a strange feeling of emptiness. And then, everything went black. There was no more sound, light, or pain. Just an absolute silence, oppressive, as if I had been pulled from reality and placed in an endless void. It was an absence of everything I knew, as if my very being was disintegrating. Meanwhile, in reality, Rachel was running to the phone. Desperate. Someone please. Someone please. My husband is unconscious. He is not breathing. The paramedics arrived quickly, bursting into our kitchen amidst the confusion. One of them, a man named Mark, began performing chest compressions while the other prepared the defibrillator. Rachel watched the scene in tears, her hands covering her mouth to stifle a scream she couldn't suppress anymore. Cardiac arrest time? Mark asked his colleague. 3 minutes, came the response. Let's not give up. Another charge. Meanwhile, I was no longer there. My body lay in the kitchen of my house, but my soul had been transported to another place. When everything around me went black, I realized I had crossed a limit. I no longer felt my body, the cold kitchen floor, or the sound of the voices around me. I was in a completely different place. But place might not be the right word. It was such an absolute void that I couldn't distinguish where I ended and where nothingness began. I was in total darkness. It wasn't like closing your eyes, where you still perceive shadows or your own consciousness. This darkness was dense, almost tangible, as if it had weight. Every part of me seemed to be being swallowed by it. But paradoxically, I still existed there, conscious. The silence was deafening. There were no familiar sounds, just a void that crushed my soul. But gradually I started to hear something. At first it was like a whisper, so low that it almost seemed like my imagination. But the whispers grew, turning into voices. These voices were unlike anything I had ever heard. They didn't come from outside, but from within the void itself. They were voices of lament, filled with regret and despair. Some spoke in Hebrew, others in languages I didn't recognize. But what deeply shook me was the content of the words. They were right. And a voice whispered with an almost palpable pain. I rejected what was clear. Now is too late. Another lamented. I heard fragments of known prayers, but they were recited differently. Words that once carried hope and connection with God were now laden with sorrow and desolation. They weren't prayers of faith, but of desperate souls, crying out for something they felt was lost forever. I began to feel a growing oppression around me. It wasn't just the darkness. It was as if this darkness was alive, conscious, and watching me. It enveloped me like a cloak, but it offered no comfort. Instead, it brought a feeling of exposure, like everything I was being laid bare. Who am I here? Who am I here? I thought, trying to understand. Why am I hearing this? Why am I here? The moment this question crossed my mind, I realized something that chilled my soul. Those voices. I wasn't just a listener. They were around me, but also within me. As if on some level their confessions were reflections of doubts and truths I had repressed throughout my life. I knew. A voice within me whispered, distinct from my own thoughts. It was the unmistakable voice of understanding and comprehension beyond words. As I struggled with the realization, visions began to unfold before me. Each scene was intensely vivid and filled with meaning. One vision showed Abraham on Mount Moriah, ready to sacrifice his son Isaac. The angel of the Lord intervened, and the voice of the Messiah explained, as Abraham was willing to sacrifice his only son, so did God provide the lamb for the sacrifice. I am that lamb. The next scene showed Moses raising the bronze serpent in the wilderness, and the voice continued, just as Moses lifted the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted, that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life. I saw the cross and understood that he was the one lifted for us. The visions continued, each revealing a different aspect of the messianic promise. I saw David writing the Psalms, his words now resonating with deeper meaning. The Lord said to my Lord, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet." I saw Isaiah prophesying about the suffering servant, and the words came to life. He was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Each scene was a powerful reminder that the entire story of redemption centered around him, the Messiah. I saw Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, all the prophets, their words now clear and unmistakable. I saw the birth in Bethlehem, the star guiding the wise men, the baptism in the Jordan, the miracles, the parables, the Last Supper, the betrayal, the trial, the crucifixion, the resurrection. Everything was interconnected, every event, every prophecy, every promise. And then I saw the final scene, a vision of the future, where a multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language was before the throne and the Lamb, worshiping him. The voice of the Messiah spoke again, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I am the one who was, who is, and who is to come." You have been called to witness this, Levi. Share what you have seen, so that others may know the truth. As the light began to fade, I felt I was being pulled back to reality. The visions disappeared, but their impact remained etched in my soul. I knew that my life would never be the same. I had seen the truth, and now I had a mission. I was back in the place of darkness, but now the darkness was no longer frightening. I knew I wasn't alone. The presence of the Messiah was with me, and his light shone within me. His words echoed in my mind, and I knew I had to share what I had learned. I had to return and tell everyone about what I had seen. I had to speak about the Messiah, about the truth that had been revealed. I had to be a witness, even if it meant facing resistance and rejection. I was ready to do so because I knew he would be with me every step of the way. I had seen the light, and now it was my responsibility to share it with the world.